Good evening to all of you, and we can start the class. Um, I'll put the recording on. So we were discussing majorly about the proteins, and we understand that proteins are the main molecules which allows the cells to work in different avenues, and these proteins are produced in a very industrial sort of a fashion with a lot of precision. So individual amino acids are added very precisely while reading a messenger RNA. This messenger RNA has a sequence which it gets from the genes present in the nucleus, that is the DNA, the main DNA. So according to the sequence in the messenger RNA, these polypeptides, the amino acids are arranged, and often finally this protein will grow in length. Now, once we have a protein chain, will that be polypeptide chain? Will that be functional? No. In many cases, it is not. We need to have a lot of post-processing of the proteins. Often the polypeptide chains has to be chopped and rejoined. In case of insulin, the same thing happens, and that's the reason where we require endoplasmic reticulum to be there. And this is the reason we do not have bacterial insulin as of it. We cannot produce. See, in biotechnology, we can engineer this thing that if we can get a copy of gene and we can put it in a bacteria, get the protein out of that. Okay, and so it's very easy to do, but there are certain catches here. We cannot do it otherwise. So the main catch over here is this, that if we have the sequence, DNA sequence, we have put it in the bacteria. Bacteria will produce its mRNA and produce the polypeptide chain, the chain of amino acids, of course. But how to process the amino acid, the bacteria will not have information. Even if you give certain proteins which are involved in the processing of a protein in eukaryotes inside the bacteria, still it will not work. Okay. um, Best example is insulin. I just told that it is actually more than 100 amino acid long gene, and this gene is copied, and the amino acids are put in places. Finally, the insulin comes out as in our body. It comes out as two chains. One is 23, or another is some 50 amino acids. So total 80. So rest 10 or 15 amino acids are chopped off. 10 to 20 amino acids are chopped off. Not at the end, probably somewhere in the middle. And these two chains actually join each other. I mean, they are tied with each other through disulfide bonds, the way we saw here. So if we have a polypeptide chain, doesn't mean we have a functional protein. The functional protein has to be functional through multiple things. First, they have to assume a secondary structure. Then once they are chopped and properly trimmed, then they have to assume a structure that is a secondary structure. Then they have to assume a tertiary structure, which is a larger part of the protein. Now, a single polypeptide chain can end up as a tertiary structure, but still be unfunctional, because its quaternary structure can only function, meaning multiple of those proteins or multiple these tertiary structures has to come together. They have to create certain domains where that only will be functional here. So the point here is that we need a very precise post-folding, that all happens in the cytoplasm of a particular kind of cell. Okay, this post-processing of the protein has a very important role for a functional protein. So what are the things which can help in post-processing? We just discussed here last class that a single missing chain or missing amino acid in the polypeptide chain can cause change in the overall hemoglobin molecule, and finally can cause a very grave disease called the amino acid. What is the amino acid which is changed? Is the sixth amino acid in a beta chain of the beta chain of your hemoglobin. Hemoglobin has 4 subunits, like it's at quaternary structures. So blues are the alpha, reds are the beta chains. So each beta chain can have approximately 140 amino acids. It's a very precise number though. I'm saying approximately, but 147 amino acids. But the sixth amino acid, if it is switched to valine, it's a glutamic acid. Now, if it switches to valine, then overall the interaction between the molecules of hemoglobin changes, and this can cause serious issue. Now, if you do not have a particular chain, protein chain, that is the issue, of course. But if you do not have the chain itself, even if you have a correct sequence and no errors in the sequence of amino acids, still you may not have a right protein, functional protein. There, we have done a lot of expression studies in bacteria, and for small proteins, yes, it does it very well. Proteins which only needs a secondary structure to function, it works with bacteria. We can produce those proteins in bacteria. I mean, we just have to copy and paste that gene in a bacteria, and bacteria will think it is its own gene and it will produce it. But complex proteins, which has got multiple subunits, it has got, even if a single polypeptide chain, do have to fold in a very complicated way. In that case also, you see, the protein folding itself needs enough amount of effort here, and often needs an additional protein called chaperonin. Chaperonins are this is a protein you see here. It's a very large protein, and it allows the polypeptide chain to slip into its tunnel, and finally the cap goes off again. Once the folding is done, it goes out. Now, the term chaperones are actually meant for a women guardian who actually guards girls under them. Okay, girls and guards, protects, train them to behave properly under them. Okay, chaperones. Okay, often it is used for males also, but it was initially used for females. So can we say these proteins are almost behaving as chaperones? Yes, they themselves are protein, of course, and they are helping other polypeptides to take and assume their functions. What are they giving? They're simply giving an environment, okay? And that environment is hydrophilic in nature. So this special hydrophilic environment isolates all other proteins from this struggling polypeptide, and allows it to fold properly. Okay, so now if you simply add a chaperone, all proteins will fold chaperonin? No, again there is a issue. So it is a complicated process. As I say, it's exactly a miracle how the protein completely folds out. We do not know exactly how it happens, but finally we see the polypeptide chain, is translated and in a eukaryotic cells ends up being a correctly folded protein. What if the protein folding isn't correct? 99% if there is involved of chaperonin, you have a correctly folded protein like this. What if you do not have that? If you do not have that, then these incorrectly folded proteins are again, shattered by another this same class of proteins, very large proteins. Except we learned this chaperonin here itself. So what are the major proteins we have in our cells? You see, ribosome related proteins, of course, and another chaperones related proteins, which helps in folding catalysts. Here actually the chaperonin comes. Okay, remember this. And in prokaryotes you don't see this chaperonin. See, can you see that? Not more. In this pneumoni, that there is a bit of chaperone kind of proteins, but they are not as good as the eukaryotic ones. Okay, so that's the reason. Another reason we do not have all proteins in living of eukaryotes cannot be properly expressed or properly folded in prokaryotes. Even if they are expressed or translated, they cannot be produced in the prokaryote cells. So yes, this is the region. So if the protein unfolds incorrectly, folds incorrectly, then there is a chance that the protein is taken out for a sacrifice, or the protein is disintegrated, the amino acids are reused. That's how it is. Sometimes unfolded proteins pile up in your cytoplasm. Will your cells be healthy? No, because your cells needed to be actively working. Any unfolded protein pile will stop its working mechanisms. Same thing happens to neurodegenerative diseases. Protein don't fold correctly, and there is a pileup of unfolded protein, and there isn't anything which can really chop it off. Okay, and that's how your cells stop producing. Neuro memory. As I told you, memory itself is a peptide, small peptide. So if the cell doesn't get additional space to make a fresh peptide, or doesn't get additional amino acids to make a peptide, so then there is a compromise, of course. So it's a disease condition also. Now, unfolded protein is a disease condition. Normal cells will have all polypeptides, which is produced through the copying of mRNA, will be folded properly. And often it happens in your endoplasmic reticulum. One of the chaperone protein is GROEL or GROES complex. This is a complex. Okay, and when we are talking about large number of proteins, and we call them complexes. Okay. Now coming to eggs, the best protein, and you can play with that protein also, and this thing about protein you must have learned in your school itself, right? In egg, the egg albumin, the transparent or the slimy part of it. When you open up an egg, you get the slimy, slippery part of liquid. Then you see this deeply yellow colored yolk. Now, when you boil it, what happens? The yolk color, does it change much? No, doesn't change much. Oh, if you do hard boil, it turns, its surface turns black a bit, but the inner core stays yellow. What happens to the glowy protein, which is straw color in nature? It turns completely white. And we call it egg white and egg yolk, right? So egg, if you really see egg white contains a particular protein called albumin. The same protein is present in your blood also, similar protein. In eggs, it is called ovalbumin. What was the need? It's as we discussed in the earlier slides. It is used as a storage protein for, that proteins are taken up by the growing cells, and these proteins are ripped off, and the basic composite amino acids are used to build a baby chick cell. Okay, So this is how an egg looks. This is your egg yolk. So yolk could be larger. And here are the proteins. Okay. So when the protein, when this portion is really flowing before boiling, the proteins are, because albumin is a globulin protein, it is actually like this. Okay. You can see that this is a normal protein, and 2-3 proteins, they can roam around, not a problem. Okay. Now when you boil it, the protein denatures. Any normally boiling denatures maximum of the protein. I can say 99.9% of the protein will be denatured, meaning it will, stretch up. The whole polypeptide chain will stretch up. Same happens to the albumin. And once it stretch up, and once you, what happens is that, these are the side chains of the amino acids. We all know that actually have made this complex globule sort of thing, or ball sort of thing. But now when it is open now, and it again tries to find its complementation of, hydrophobicity, complementation of electrostatic forces. What happens? It finds another chain to bind like this. Similarly, it will find another chain. This will find. So what happens here? Now this, which was the fluid which was completely flowing here with this globular protein, the fluid will not be able to flow because this is a polymer linkage happens. These all polymers are hydrated. Water molecules are around, okay, but they will not allow the shape to distort. Okay, you see a solid mass and it gets a shape now. We can normally call it as a gel sort of thing. Okay, this is called the denatured protein. Will the denatured protein work? No. This same thing happens to enzymes also. Enzymes, often they are folded like this, and you have the small portion where the reaction happens. Now, if you open up the enzyme, like denature it, will it work? No, it will not work. It's simply a polypeptide chain. Polypeptide chains are non-functional. Unless it forms secondary, tertiary structure, the final protein, it is non-functional. So with heating, you actually destroy their functionality. Okay. So what happens here? You can, but there are some proteins, after cooling, taking off the denaturation forces, you can renature it. For egg white, if you put a lot of urea into it, okay, urea into it, somehow, I don't know why, but urea gives this hydrophilic environment like the GROEL, like your chaperone proteins. They allow renaturation of the proteins. So when we express many proteins in bacteria, we just give DNA inside the bacteria, and we expect a protein, but we do not get a protein. We normally get lumps of this, like lumps of albumin in egg white. We get this thing. But when we add this urea into it, it tends to renature and finally makes this globular proteins or whatever structure it is. It doesn't happen with all the cases, but some cases we can get a really folded protein which is functional again. Okay, this is possible. So this is all about proteins. Let's go to the nucleic acid. This is how we are discussing a complete neat ball of wool. Okay, you can see that, and this is the tangled mass of wool. So from this too, we have to make it this. We can do it with a urea, and with boiling, we can. This is a misfolded protein. This is not a stretched one. Okay, misfolded one. These proteins are normally thrown out. Next is the nucleic acid. Okay, this is another macromolecule, and if you really see, that nucleic acid in your chromosome number 1, the DNA of your chromosome number 1, that is a nucleic acid. That can be that is actually the longest known molecule, a single molecule. Okay, it's a very long single molecule. Again, if I say it is about the biology of Earth. Okay, so that means these molecules are very big, extremely large. Can they be larger than protein? Yes, they are. They can be larger than protein. DNA can be definitely larger than protein. So what are the nucleic acids we have heard about? DNA we have heard about, and RNA we have heard about. Where is the nucleic acid terms comes? This is the Na. Na. D for deoxyribose. Sorry, this. And R for, what is a ribose? Ribose is a sugar. Okay, we have hexose, right? Our glucose, fructose are hexose. This is oxygen. Don't mistake it with carbon. Okay, this is another carbon atom. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is a hexose sugar. In case of ribose, just omit one sugar. So it becomes a pentose, right? Five sugar compound, 5 carbon sugars, you can say that. Okay, so ribose is a 5 carbon sugar, and deoxyribose, we have to avoid oxygen from here. Okay, and here there are OH. Some OH group has to be replaced with oxygen. I'll just come to that. Okay, so this is how DNA and RNAs are named. Now, so what is the main role of nucleic acid? Nucleic acids, we just understood that it stores certain informations. What are the informations? What are the kind of protein has to be produced? Okay, and this informations are executed. Yes, these informations are executed in the normal working cells through making more proteins and basic working of the cells. That works. Can this information be transmitted through hereditary? Can we transport all the proteins, whatever the cell had made, to the next level and just expect the same protein be produced? No. Each protein has its own function. Okay, it doesn't have this memory function, hereditary memory function. Okay, so we need additional molecule to keep record of what are the list of protein this particular cell needs. That record is kept in the nucleic acid, that is particularly the DNA. Now DNA and RNA works in sync. You see, DNA is copied to a messenger RNA, and messenger RNA comes out of the nucleus and is copied to a polypeptide chain. Okay, that is how your protein is produced. So let's understand the basic things about the nucleus. Okay, each polypeptide chain, when it is being produced, you must assume that it must have come from a gene. Okay, a small stretch of DNA. Okay, this is the genomic DNA. A small stretch of DNA, suppose this is a genomic DNA, this stretch is called a gene, which is exactly copied to mRNA, and mRNA copies it to and mRNA is read in the form of a, translated in the form of a polypeptide chain. Okay, so this is a gene, and multiple genes are there in a particular stretch of DNA. As I told, chromosome number 1 itself has a longest DNA because it's the largest chromosome of our body. Okay, now Let's understand how this chemically these molecules are made, RNA or DNA, how they are made up of in chemical. Okay. I'll come to the history a bit later. Let's see, this is the chemical composition of it. Okay, so when you talk about polypeptide or polynucleotide, this is how it looks. Okay, this is a ribose sugar. You can see that the basic difference between the DNA and RNA is the second carbon atom. In the second carbon atom, the OH group is replaced by H group as in the deoxyribose sugar. Okay, this is one difference between RNA and DNA, but that is how they get their name. Okay, meaning one oxygen less. That's how deoxy. Okay, so I roughly just drew that diagram. You see this. This is how it looks like. It's a pentose sugar. Oxygen is there in the ring, of course. Okay, this is one component, but DNA isn't made up of only one component. DNA also have another component called the bases. Okay, these are the bases. Purines and pyrimidines. These are the bases. Okay, what are these bases? These are nitrogen and carbon based cyclic compounds. Okay, these are cyclic compounds. Pyrimidines are single cyclic compounds. Purines are double cyclic compounds. Okay, now purines have there are two varieties of purine normally, adenine and guanine. I have been talking about ATP, right? ATP comes from adenosine triphosphate, okay, and there adenine is there, and if it links to 3 phosphates, then we can call it adenosine triphosphate. It can link to 2 phosphates, adenosine diphosphates. Similarly, we can have GTP, guanosine triphosphates also. Okay, that is another. Sometimes GTPs are also used for energy currencies. Then we have pyrimidines, which are single chain compounds, and we can have cytosine, thymine, and uracil. You don't have to remember the structure individually, but you have to remember that pyrimidines have a single cycle, a single hexagonal, ring. Purines have a hexagonal and a pentagonal ring. You have to remember that. And both are composed of carbon and nitrogen in the ring. Okay, in the ring, do you see any oxygen in the ring? No, there is no oxygen in the ring. Okay, ribose has oxygen in its ring, and these are called the nitrogenous bases. So how does this work? This is a sugar, and this is a nitrogenous base. This sugar attached. This is a sugar that is the ribose sugar attaches to the nitrogenous base, and this sugar also attaches to a phosphate group. Okay, this is called a nucleotide. All nucleic acids are polymers of these nucleotides. If you completely remove this phosphate group, we can call it as a nucleoside. That is sugar plus the nitrogenous base. Okay, but the identity of a nucleotide comes majorly from first the sugar, because it is oxy or deoxy, we will know that. Second, from the nitrogenous base, whether it is pyridine, purine, if it is purine, whether it is A or G, or if it is pyrimidine, it is C, T or U. Okay. Surprisingly, if you see this pyrimidines, you see in DNA, you will only see thymine present. You will not see uracil. Okay. In RNAs, you will only see uracil in place of thymine. So when things are getting copied, the informations are exactly being copied. then the T is replaced by U, that is the uracil. These are the codes for cytosine for C, thymine for T, uracil for U, adenine for A, and guanine for G, of course. So, so now you see, if I take it a broader picture, we go back to the broader picture. Can you see this? This is how a single chain of polynucleotide is being made. See, this is the purine ring. This is the pyrimidine ring. Pyrimidine, pyrimidine. Okay. So that means individual species, individual nucleotide can be of different nature, of course. Okay. Let's go back to the history. Does this information came in a single day? No, it didn't come in a single day. First, the nucleic acid were simply recognized by Friedrich Mischer. He said that in nucleus there is some acidic granules called nuclein, and that probably has some role in the hereditary. He didn't know it properly. But this is time, of early invention, early discovery of cellular organs. So then in 1980s, Kaushal, he identified that this substance, whatever there is in the nucleus, is extremely acidic in nature. Also, it has got some basic property also. If you split them or break them, it can turn to be basic. That means, suppose if you separate phosphates from the nucleosides, it can be basic nature because there are nitrogen groups there. Okay. Later on, the name nucleic acid was given by Richard Altman. Okay, that is the name where it comes from. Nucleic acid, present in nucleus, of course. The first, so how this nucleic acid looks, nobody knew. How the nucleic acid works, nobody knew. The first attempt of, crystallizing a DNA molecule and taking an X-ray diffraction image of it. This is how we find the structures of molecules, structures of salts. We crystallize molecules, and once they are in order, we take X-ray diffraction. So from different planes of arrangements, crystal planes, you get this X-ray diffracted, and that's how we get a rough image. How does it look? But they could not, really, Astbury and Bell, they could not figure out this the structure of DNA completely until 1953, when Watson and Crick actually explained the structure of DNA, and they told that it is actually a double helical molecule. This is the most famous molecule in the history of mankind. Okay. You see a lot of merchandise, t-shirts onto that. This is a double helical molecule. That means single nucleotide chain is in a helical mode, or it's a spiral in nature. Second, another nucleotide chain runs parallelly down. So these are actually anti-parallel in nature. Okay. And I am not doing this cyclic helical nature now, but this is how it runs, anti-parallel in nature, and individual chain contains different. Both the chains have exactly the same sequences, but they have a complementation. What are the complementation thing within this double helical nature? So when they are having a double helix, there has to be certain complementation. I think I have, yes, this is the complementations. You see here that, the blue color you can represent as cytosine here. You can see this is a single chain. single chain. Single chain where you can, it is very easily represented as a helical ladder actually. So you see the orange colors are the uracil, this is the RNA. In case of DNA, it turns to thymine, red color. Okay, yellow colors are the adenine, and G is the green color, okay, and C is the blue color. So in case of DNA, when we are looking for complementation, you see here is that always a red color, that is thymine, is completely paired with an adenine, that means a purine and pyrimidine, both are paired, okay. Similarly, in case of green and blue, see here is that this is called a base pair, okay. When two complementation happens, unless you cannot have a steady double helical structure, right? So two molecules has to have some soft forces complementation. And what is the soft forces here? This is a hydrogen bonding between these, and this is very surprising. These hydrogen bondings are very, very specific for the other pair of the molecule or the other partner. If you change the partner, this bonding, the force of the bonding will not be so high. That means there is high chances this whole structure may crumble if you mismatch the pairs. So guanine always pairs with cytosine, okay. Cytosine is a pyrimidine, guanine is a purine. Similarly, adenine is a purine and thymine is a pyrimidine. So this is how the pairing happens. And this is where the double helical DNA appears. In case of RNA, there are some cases, some viruses which has got double-stranded RNA. Okay, so these RNAs are they get pairing in the similar manner, just only thymine portion is replaced by the uracil. Now, if you ask, there are highly you can have a question that what if you can have a simple uracil in it? My answer would be, that if you simply replace one thymine to a uracil here in a DNA, then there would be a bit of structural issue, but not much. Not much. But the devices or the machineries which keeps on copying the DNA or copying the DNA to produce further DNA, copying the DNA to produce mRNA from it or ribosomal RNA from it or any other variety of RNA from it. Those complexes may not be comfortable seeing a uracil base in the DNA double helix. Okay, does it happen ever? Yes, it happens. When we talk about stay away from radioactive radiations, stay away from UV radiations, this is the reason why they say you have to stay away, because your DNA is sensitive, and if you expose that to UV or certain radioactive radiations, there are high chances that the water around it can be reactive, extremely reactive, and convert T to C. Okay, cytosine, meaning thymine to cytosine, cytosine to thymine. Often it is converted to an uracil. Okay, and that's not a very good sign. Okay, that would be all for today. I think tomorrow we have a test. Okay. Hope you guys are ready for that.